The Deep Dive, decoding John Newton Tillman, Arkansas politics, university leadership, and the laws that shaped an era.
Join us for a fascinating deep dive into the complex life and career of John Newton Tillman. Using biographical sources, we trace his incredible journey from a rural school teacher in the late 1800s to a prominent lawyer, judge, president of the University of Arkansas, and ultimately a U.S. representative. We impartially examine his significant historical impacts, including his role as an impeachment manager in Congress and his authorship of the controversial 1891 separate coach law. Perfect for history buffs and lifelong learners, this deep dive explores how one individual can intersect with the courts, academia, and federal government over a single, rapidly changing lifetime.
John Newton Tillman, Arkansas history, University of Arkansas presidents, U.S. House of Representatives history, Jim Crow laws history, separate coach law of 1891, Washington County, Arkansas, U.S. political history, George W. English impeachment.
Welcome, everyone. We are stepping into another deep dive today, and the premise for this one is actually a bit unconventional.
Yeah, it really is.
Usually we are working through these massive, dense volumes of text, right? Like a new piece of nonfiction, a sweeping historical biography, or maybe a stack of peer-reviewed research papers.
Or the really heavy stuff.
Exactly. We take all that density and try to extract the vital insights so you, the listener, can walk away with a deeper understanding of the subject.
But today is different.
Very different. The source material you provided us operates on the exact opposite end of the spectrum. We are looking at a single Wikipedia entry.
Just one page.
Just one page. And it's not even a comprehensive entry. If you scroll to the very bottom of the page, the editors have explicitly categorized it as a stub.
Which, in the parlance of digital encyclopedias, means it is considered fundamentally incomplete.
Right.
A stub is basically a placeholder. It is a skeleton of dates, locations, and titles, waiting for someone to come along and flesh out the actual narrative.
Yeah, it's just the bare bones.
But what is so compelling about the specific text you sent us is the sheer density of the skeleton itself.
Wow.
We are looking at the biographical outline of a man named John N. Tillman, who lives from 1859 to 1929.
Right.
And even in this highly compressed bullet point format, the trajectory of his life is staggering.
It really is. I mean, when you strip away the narrative and just look at the raw data points of his career, it almost reads like a fictionalized account of American civic life.
Oh, absolutely.
We're talking about an individual who started out as a rural school teacher.
Yep.
He then becomes a lawyer. From there, he is a state senator who successfully authors major society-altering legislation.
He doesn't stop there.
Not at all. Then he becomes a prosecuting attorney, then a circuit court judge. Then, in this massive pivot, he becomes the president of a major state university.
Which is wild.
Completely wild. And finally, he caps it all off as a federal congressman who helps manage an impeachment trial in Washington, D.C.
It is an incredible cross-section of institutions. What we want to do in this deep dive is to decompress that timeline.
Unpack the stub.
Exactly. Because when you see a career that spans local education, the state legislature, the judicial bench, academia, and the federal government, it tells you something profound about the era he lived in.
Yeah, because today we tend to view these professions as highly specialized, right? Like mutually exclusive tracks.
Definitely. The academic track does not easily cross over into the judicial track today.
No.
But in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, particularly in a state like Arkansas, those boundaries were highly fluid. Local power, education, and the law were deeply intertwined.
I think there is also a really interesting philosophical angle to how we interact with this specific type of source material today.
How do you mean?
Well, think about it. You are looking at this Wikipedia page on your phone or your monitor. It's surrounded by modern digital architecture. There are navigation menus, toggles for light mode or dark mode, links to Wikimedia Commons.
Right, the whole modern interface.
Exactly. It is this perfectly engineered, beta-tested interface. And sitting right in the middle of it is a summary of a human life that began before the American Civil War.
It is quite the contrast.
It is a stark reminder of how we consume history now. We're compressing decades of complex human experience into a few kilobytes of data.
And that compression is exactly what we need to unpack, because behind every comma and semicolon in this stub, there are years of intense systemic change happening in the United States.
Absolutely.
So if we're going to reconstruct how one individual navigated all those different spheres of power, We really need to start by looking exactly when and where he entered the picture.
Let's do that. Let's look at the origins detailed in the text. John Newton Tillman was born on December 13th, 1859, near Springfield, Missouri.
Right.
And you really have to pause and contextualize that specific year and that specific location.
We do, because 1859 in Missouri is not just a date on a calendar.
Like,
It is the absolute precipice of a national
at
collapse.
the eve of the Civil War.
He is born mere months before the outbreak of the American Civil War. And being born near Springfield, Missouri, places him squarely in a fiercely contested border state.
Which was incredibly chaotic.
Beyond chaotic.
Yeah.
While the text doesn't explicitly document his family's personal experience during the war, we know that the environment of his early childhood would have been defined by extreme instability. Missouri experienced intense guerrilla warfare, deep internal divisions, constant military movement.
So his entire formative period infancy through early childhood is essentially framed by conflict.
Yes.
And then his adolescence takes place entirely during the post-war Reconstruction era, which was its own unique period of social and political upheaval, especially in the border states in the South.
That is the crucial backdrop for everything that follows. The generation born right on the eve of the Civil War came of age in a society that was completely rebuilding its institutions from the ground up.
Right.
And you see that reflected immediately in his educational background. The text states that he attended the common schools.
And for you listening today, you likely grew up navigating highly structured, standardized educational systems, right?
Right.
You had defined grade levels, specialized curricula.
Standardized testing.
Exactly. So it's worth taking a moment to understand what a common school meant in the 1860s and 1870s.
It was very different.
In rural Missouri and Arkansas during Reconstruction, a common school was typically a deeply localized, often one-room operation. It was highly dependent on whatever resources the immediate community could scrape together.
Yeah, the calendar was often dictated by agricultural needs rather than a fixed academic schedule.
You went to school when you weren't needed on the farm.
Exactly. It was foundational, basic education. But from that localized starting point, the timeline shows him moving to the University of Arkansas at Fayetteville, where he graduates in 1880.
Okay, so let's do the math there.
Right. If we extrapolate from his birth year of 1859, he is around 20 or 21 years old when he finishes his degree.
Pretty standard age for a graduate.
But it is the very next line in the source material that hints at the kind of drive and ambition that is going to define the rest of his career. It says, quote, he taught school while studying law and was admitted to the bar in 1883.
That one sentence is doing an immense amount of heavy lifting.
It really is.
Let's break down the mechanics of what that actually entails. Because when a modern reader sees studying law, the immediate assumption is a formal enrollment in a law school.
Right, taking out loans, sitting in lecture halls.
Taking the LSATs, cramming for finals. But in the late 19th century, particularly in a place like Arkansas, the pathway to the legal profession was entirely different.
It was overwhelmingly based on the apprenticeship model, or what was commonly referred to as reading the law.
Reading the law.
You didn't necessarily go to a formal institution. You found an established attorney, you gained access to their legal library, and you studied the foundational texts like Blackstone's commentaries, often while performing clerical duties for the firm.
But what makes this timeline so compelling is that the text explicitly states he was teaching school while doing this.
Right. He is not a wealthy aristocrat who can afford to just sit in a parlor and read legal theory all day.
He has to support himself.
Exactly.
He is working, presumably full-time, instructing students in a rural or developing educational system, and then dedicating whatever remaining hours he has to deciphering complex legal doctrine.
And he does this successfully in an incredibly tight window. He graduates university in 1880, and he is admitted to the bar by 1883.
Just 3 years.
3 years of self-directed study while holding down a teaching job. It speaks to a very specific type of upward mobility that was available at the time, provided you had an almost ruthless level of discipline.
Which he clearly had.
He clearly recognized that while teaching was a respectable profession, the legal arena was the gateway to actual civic power. He wanted access to the courts and to the political apparatus, and he essentially willed himself into that sphere.
And once he crosses that threshold into the legal profession, his ascent is remarkably rapid. The text notes that he commenced his law practice in Fayetteville, Arkansas.
Right.
But he doesn't just hang a shingle, quietly take on minor disputes, and slowly build a practice over decades.
No, not at all.
Almost immediately, he integrates himself into the administrative machinery of the county. In 1884, just a year after being admitted to the bar, he becomes the clerk of the Circuit Court of Washington County.
This is a brilliant strategic move for a young lawyer. We need to look at what a circuit court clerk actually does, especially in 1884.
Right, what's the day-to-day?
The clerk is the engine of the local judiciary. They are responsible for the dockets, the filings, the official records. By taking this position, he is placing himself at the absolute center of every legal dispute, every property transaction, and every criminal proceeding in the county.
So he's getting paid to learn the exact mechanics of the system he just joined?
Precisely.
He's interacting with every sitting judge, every prominent attorney, and likely every major landholder or business owner who has business before the court.
It is essentially an advanced real-world masterclass in local power dynamics.
And he holds that clerk position from 1884 until 1889. But if we look closely at the timeline provided in the source, we run into a fascinating structural anomaly.
The overlap.
Yes, the overlap. He is the clerk of the circuit court until 1889. The very next sentence tells us that he served in the Arkansas State Senate from 1888 to 1892.
So from 1888 to 1889, he is simultaneously holding the position of the circuit court clerk and serving as a sitting senator in the state legislature.
Let's explore the mechanics of that, because it is something that would be highly scrutinized, if not outright illegal, under modern dual office-holding bans or separation of powers doctrines.
Oh, today it would never fly.
Right. Today we have strict guardrails preventing someone from simultaneously working in the judicial branch while voting in the legislative branch.
But in the context of late 19th century Arkansas, those guardrails were clearly much more porous.
Yeah.
You have a man in his late 20s who is managing the administrative flow of the local judiciary and then taking a train to the state capitol to literally write the statutes that the local judiciary is tasked with enforcing.
It's incredible.
It illustrates a much smaller, highly concentrated ruling class. If you had the education, the legal standing, and the ambition, you could occupy multiple nodes of state and local power at the exact same time.
It is a profound consolidation of influence. And it brings us to a critical piece of legislation mentioned in the text during his tenure in the state Senate.
Yeah.
And as we look at this next historical event, I really want to reiterate for you, our listener, that our approach here is purely structural and objective.
Right.
The historical impacts of the Jim Crow era are extensively documented, and our goal today is not to endorse or litigate the morality of the period.
Definitely not.
We are just here to impartially examine the mechanics of how this specific history unfolded, based strictly on the source material provided.
That is the exact right approach, because the text makes a very definitive statement. It says, quote, "In the Arkansas State Senate, he proposed the separate coach law of 1891, a Jim Crow law to segregate African-American passengers. The bill became law."
What stands out immediately in that phrasing is the word proposed.
Yes.
The source explicitly identifies him not just as a legislator who voted along with a majority, but as the author and the driving force behind the bill.
Yeah.
He is the proposer.
From a structural perspective, we have to look at the timeline. 1891 is a pivotal year. Across the American South in the early 1890s, state legislatures were aggressively moving to codify segregation into formal statutory law.
Moving away from the unwritten rules.
Exactly. The era of informal, localized segregation was being replaced by sweeping state mandates. And the target of this specific law, passenger coaches, likely railroads, is highly significant.
Why is that?
Well, railroads were the primary arteries of long-distance public transit. They were spaces where people of different backgrounds inevitably intersected.
So the objective of the legislation was to use state power to fundamentally alter the social dynamics of public transportation. And the text notes simply, the bill became law.
Which tells us a great deal about his political acumen and his influence within the Senate.
He was young, too.
Very young. He is around 31 or 32 years old at this time. To author a foundational piece of Jim Crow legislation and successfully shepherd it through the legislative process, whipping the votes, navigating the committees, and getting it enacted, requires significant political capital.
It really demonstrates how effectively he had utilized his early years as a court clerk and a local lawyer to build a base of power.
Right.
It also highlights the immense authority concentrated in state legislatures during this window of time. Local politicians were actively using machinery of the state to legally mandate the social order of everyday life.
And you can see how achieving that level of legislative success would naturally propel him into the next phase of his career.
Because once you have authored the laws,
the logical next step in that era's political progression is to oversee their enforcement.
Precisely. His tenure in the state Senate concludes in 1892, and that exact same year, the source material shows him pivoting away from the legislative branch and moving fully into the judicial sphere.
Right into the courts.
The text reads, from 1892 to 1898, he served as prosecuting attorney of the Fourth Judicial Circuit.
The symmetry of that career path is striking. He leaves the Capitol where he was drafting the penal codes, and he walks right into the Fourth Judicial Circuit courtroom as the physical embodiment of the state's authority.
As the prosecuting attorney, he is now the one bringing charges, arguing before juries, and actively enforcing the statutory framework he helped build.
It is the ultimate insider advantage. Who better to prosecute a violation of a state statute than the man who spent the last 4 years in the Senate writing them?
No one.
He holds this prosecutorial role for 6 years, which is a significant tenure. It means he is prosecuting hundreds, perhaps thousands of cases, deeply embedding himself in the daily operational realities of the regional justice system.
But as we follow the timeline in the stub, we hit one of those fascinating historical blind spots.
The gap.
The gap. The text says he was the prosecuting attorney until 1898, but the very next clause states that he served as judge of the same circuit court from 1900 to 1905.
The 2-year gap, from 1898 to 1900. In a highly compressed Wikipedia stub, a 2-year gap is just empty space on the screen.
Just a few pixels.
Right. But in a human life, especially the life of a highly ambitious political operator in his late 30s, that is a massive amount of unrecorded time.
I always find these gaps so intriguing because they invite you to hypothesize about the missing pieces of the historical record.
What do you think he was doing?
Well, did he intentionally step down as prosecutor to return to private practice and build wealth? Was the gap the result of a lost local election? Or was he spending those 2 years quietly campaigning and maneuvering behind the scenes to secure the judgeship?
Given his trajectory, the latter seems highly probable. Moving from prosecutor to circuit court judge is a significant elevation in status. You are no longer just an advocate, you are the ultimate arbiter of the law in that region.
It's the top job.
Whether he was campaigning, practicing privately, or simply biding his time, by 1900, he has successfully claimed the bench.
And when you synthesize the timeline up to this point, 1900 to 1905, the total capture of the local legal apparatus is almost hard to comprehend by modern standards.
There really is.
Over a roughly 20-year period, John N. Tillman was the administrative clerk managing the court's paperwork. Then he was the prosecutor arguing the state's cases before the court. And finally, he's the judge presiding over the entire court.
He didn't just participate in the justice system of the Fourth Circuit for a quarter of a century. He practically was the justice system.
He knew every angle.
He understood the architecture of local power from every conceivable angle: administrative, prosecutorial, and judicial, which is why his next career move, as outlined in the text, is so profoundly unorthodox.
It really is. If you are tracking this career, you assume the next logical step is a seat on the state Supreme Court.
Or maybe a run for governor.
Exactly. But instead, we hit the years 1905 to 1912. The text states, he served as president of the University of Arkansas from 1905 to 1912.
He leaves the bench entirely to take over academia.
I am still trying to square that level of local judicial control with a sudden pivot to higher education because it does not fit the standard playbook we are used to today.
Not at all.
If a major state university is searching for a president today, they are almost exclusively looking at candidates with decades of deeply entrenched academic experience.
Provost Dean.
Tenured researchers who have spent their lives navigating faculty senates and publishing requirements. The idea of a university board of trustees tapping a sitting state circuit court judge to run the campus is highly unusual.
It is highly unusual today, yes. But if we hypothesize based on the structural realities of the early 20th century, it actually makes a brilliant kind of sense.
How so?
We have to consider what a state university, particularly a land-grant institution like the University of Arkansas, required to survive and grow in 1905. It didn't necessarily need a purely academic philosopher at the helm. It needed a political operator.
Oh, right. Because state universities are fundamentally tethered to the state legislature.
Completely tethered.
Their funding, their building projects, their expansion, it all relies on the goodwill and the appropriations of the politicians in the state capitol.
Exactly. And who better to secure that funding than a former state senator who knows how the legislative committees work?
That makes perfect sense.
Who better to navigate complex administrative bureaucracy and land disputes than a former circuit court judge and prosecutor? The university likely looked at his resume, and saw an individual with unmatched political connections and administrative fortitude.
He could speak their language.
He was someone who could interface with the ruling class of the state as a total peer, because he used to be one of them.
And we also have to recognize the incredible full-circle nature of this appointment. Let's look back at the very beginning of the timeline. Where did he graduate from in 1880?
The University of Arkansas at Fayetteville.
That is a remarkable narrative arc. He walks out of those doors in 1880 as a 20-year-old common school graduate who is about to start teaching and reading the law. 25 years later, she returns.
As the boss.
But this time, he is walking into the president's office. He is now responsible for the institutional future of the very place that gave him his start.
The source material actually provides a fantastic piece of metadata that helps us contextualize his exact place in the university's history.
The list of presidents.
Right. It includes a complete chronological list of the presidents and chancellors of the University of Arkansas. And tracking this list is like watching the structural evolution of American higher education in real time.
Let's trace it. The lineage of presidents starts in 1871 with Gates. Then it moves through Bishop, Gates again, Hill, Edgar, Murphy, Buchanan, Hartzog, and then Tillman.
He is officially the 9th president of the university.
He takes over from Hartzog in 1905, and according to the list, he is succeeded in 1913 by Futrall, who ends up serving an incredible tenure all the way to 1939.
Which is a massive run.
It is. This placement firmly roots Tillman's presidency in the early foundational era of the university. He is guiding the institution right at the dawn of the 20th century, a period when state universities were transitioning from small, localized colleges into much more robust academic centers.
What is equally fascinating about this metadata is how it documents the changing administrative scope of the institution. If you follow the list of presidents past Tillman, it continues through figures like Fulbright, Harding, Jones, Caldwell, Mullins, Bishop, and reaches Martin in 1982.
But then there is an asterisk next to Martin's name.
Yes. The text includes a specific note. Martin continued as president of the University of Arkansas system after 1982. That is the exact moment the campus-level leadership title changes.
Right. The source then provides a secondary list, tracking the chancellors starting with Nugent in 1982 and rolling through Gatewood, Ferriter, White, Gearhart, Steinmetz, all the way up to Robinson in 2023.
This isn't just a change in vocabulary. It reflects a massive structural reality.
The university had grown.
Exactly. By 1982, the university had grown so large, encompassing multiple campuses across the state, that it required a system president to oversee the whole operation, while individual campuses required chancellors.
So when we look at Tillman's era, from 1905 to 1912, we understand that he was leading a much leaner, less centralized, and vastly different institution than the massive academic system that exists today.
He was a singular executive managing a singular growing campus.
He serves in that capacity for 7 years. By the time his tenure ends in 1912, he is in his early 50s. If you look at the totality of what he has accomplished by this point, educator, lawyer, senator, prosecutor, judge, and university president, most individuals would consider that an overwhelmingly full and complete career.
You'd be done.
It would be the natural point to retire, write a memoir, and enjoy life in Fayetteville.
But the timeline in this stub just keeps going. And it doesn't just keep going, it dramatically escalates in scale.
We move from the local and state level directly to the federal level.
Right.
The text tells us, quote, Tillman was elected as a Democrat to the 64th and to the 6 succeeding Congresses, March 4th, 1915 to March 3rd, 1929.
He leaves academia and re-enters the political arena, but this time on the national stage. He is elected to the United States House of Representatives, representing Arkansas's 3rd congressional district.
And he is not just a brief, one-term placeholder.
No, the text specifies the 64th and to the 6 succeeding Congresses. That is 14 consecutive years in Washington, D.C., 7 back-to-back electoral victories.
We have to consider the massive global and national events encompassed within that 14-year window from 1915 to 1929.
It's a huge era.
He enters Congress just as World War I is erupting in Europe, serves through the entirety of American involvement in that conflict, navigates the sweeping social changes and economic boom of the Roaring '20s, and leaves office right on the brink of the Great Depression.
He is voting on and shaping federal policy during one of the most volatile eras in modern history.
And just as we did with the university presidents, the source provides us with the metadata for the Arkansas 3rd District representatives. It allows us to see exactly where he fits into the continuous chain of representative democracy.
The lineage starts long before him, moving through names like Bowles, Edwards, Wilshire, Gunter, Cravens, Rogers, McRae, Dinsmore, and Floyd. The text notes that Tillman directly succeeded John C. Floyd.
And after his 14-year run, the seat passes to Fuller, then Ellis, Fulbright, Trimble, Hammerschmidt, the Hutchinsons, Boozman, and Womack.
When you read that sheer volume of names, it really emphasizes how any single representative, even one who serves for a decade and a half, is essentially a temporary custodian of a permanent democratic institution.
That's a great way to put it.
Tillman held that specific link in the chain for 14 years, representing the shifting interests of his district on a national scale.
But the Wikipedia stub does not just give us his dates of service. It provides one incredibly detailed, highly specific historical anecdote from his time in Congress. And it is an event that perfectly synthesizes his entire prior career.
The 1926 impeachment.
Yes. The text states, quote, "He was one of the managers appointed by the House of Representatives in 1926 to conduct the impeachment proceedings against George W. English, Judge of the United States District Court for the Eastern District of Illinois."
This is a remarkable intersection of biography and constitutional procedure. For you listening, it is important to understand the mechanics of what an impeachment manager actually is, based on the constitutional framework the text is referencing.
Right. How does it work?
When the U.S. House of Representatives votes to impeach a federal official, they're essentially handing down an indictment. But the actual trial takes place in the Senate.
And the House cannot just hand over a piece of paper. They have to actively prosecute the case in the Senate chamber. So they appoint a select group of their own members, the managers, to act as the prosecution team.
Exactly. And the profound irony of John N. Tillman being selected for this role is breathtaking. Look at the specific target of the impeachment.
George W. English, a sitting federal judge.
Now look at the resume of the man the House selects to prosecute him.
Tillman is a former prosecuting attorney. He has years of experience building cases, arguing evidence, and seeking convictions.
And even more crucially, he is a former circuit court judge.
He knows exactly how a courtroom operates from the perspective of the bench. He knows the standard of conduct expected of a judge.
The symmetry is incredibly poetic. The House of Representatives essentially looked at their roster and realized they had a member who was custom-built by his past career for this exact scenario.
It's almost too perfect.
Very few congressmen possess the precise combination of legislative savvy required to navigate the House politics of an impeachment, combined with the hard-nosed prosecutorial experience to conduct a trial, combined with the intimate judicial knowledge to effectively cross-examine or dismantle the defenses of a federal judge.
It is the absolute culmination of his legal life. He started by reading borrowed law books while teaching rural school kids, and now he is standing in the halls of Congress, utilizing decades of state-level judicial experience to prosecute a corrupt federal judge on behalf of the United States government.
You really have to wonder what the psychological dynamic was in that room.
Oh, I'd love to know. What did Judge English think when he realized the lead prosecutor trying to strip him of his gavel was a man who used to wield one himself?
It is one of those highly specific historical moments that feels almost scripted, and it represents the pinnacle of his federal influence. But as we move past the 1926 impeachment, we enter the final section of the timeline provided by the text.
The end of the road.
And the conclusion of his life is documented with a stark, abrupt brevity.
The final chapter. The source material states, quote, "Tillman did not seek renomination in 1928. He died in Fayetteville, Arkansas on March 9, 1929, and was interred in Evergreen Cemetery."
The chronology here is incredibly tight. It requires us to look closely at the exact dates to understand the reality of his final months.
Let's do the timeline. He decides not to run for renomination during the 1928 election cycle. His final 7th term in the House, the 70th Congress, officially concludes on March 3, 1929.
Right.
And the text notes he died on March 9, 1929.
He passed away exactly 6 days after his 14-year career in the federal government officially expired.
6 days. That proximity is staggering. He essentially worked right up until the absolute limit of his physical life.
It raises a very poignant historical mystery that the stub leaves entirely unanswered.
Did he know?
Right. Did he know his health was rapidly failing when he made the decision not to seek renomination in 1928? Was he aware that he was entering his final months and simply chose to finish out his mandated term?
Or was his decline sudden and unexpected in the immediate aftermath of his retirement?
The text gives us nothing but the dates. But the closeness of those dates paints a picture of a man who remained in the arena until he physically could not participate anymore.
I really want you, the listener, to reflect on the sheer endurance required for a life structured like this. Think about the timeline we just walked through.
It's exhausting just to read it.
He steps into the role of circuit court clerk in 1884. From that moment forward until he leaves Congress on March 3rd, 1929, he is almost never out of a significant public office or a prominent leadership role.
45 years.
For 45 uninterrupted years, his daily life is entirely consumed by public service, legal administration, academic governance, and political maneuvering.
It is a level of sustained, relentless civic engagement that is exceedingly rare, regardless of how one analyzes his legacy. Whether focusing on his foundational role in expanding the state university, his long tenure shaping local judicial administration, his 14 years navigating federal crises in Congress, or his controversial authorship of the 1891 separate coach law, his footprint is indelible.
He was not just a participant in the history of Arkansas and the nation during this volatile era.
No, he was one of its active architects.
It is remarkable how much weight these brief sentences carry when you actually take the time to interrogate them. So, as we wrap up this analysis, let's briefly summarize the massive scope of the resume we just decoded.
Let's do it.
We started with a young man born on the eve of the Civil War. He becomes a rural educator. He relies on immense self-discipline to study the law and gain admission to the bar. He masters local politics as a court clerk.
He authors major state legislation as a senator.
He enforces the law as a prosecuting attorney. He interprets the law as a circuit court judge.
He pivots to academia to become the 9th president of the University of Arkansas.
And he concludes his public life by spending over a decade as a federal congressman, culminating in his role as an impeachment manager.
And every single one of those massive, life-altering career phases, spanning 7 decades, multiple national crises, and sweeping sociological changes, is contained within an article that a digital encyclopedia categorizes as incomplete.
Which brings me to a final provocative thought that I want to leave you with today. The source material we use for this entire deep dive is a stub.
Just a stub.
It is literally defined by its lack of comprehensive detail. It is just a skeletal framework of dates, metadata, and brief professional milestones. Yet, when we slowed down and unpacked those simple bullet points, we found an individual who fundamentally shaped state statutes, directed a major academic institution, and influenced the federal judiciary.
It forces a reevaluation of how we interact with the endless streams of information we encounter daily. When you are scrolling through digital archives or casually reading a brief summary, how much massive, sweeping historical impact is currently hiding in plain sight.
Exactly. What untold depths are you missing when you skim past a few digital paragraphs? What vast, complex human narratives exist entirely within the neglected stubs of history, just waiting for someone to ask the right questions about the spaces between the dates?
It makes you want to click on every obscure link you find.
Just to uncover what else is hiding in the margins. Thank you so much for joining us on this incredible deep dive today. Keep questioning the sources around you, keep looking for the intricate mechanics hidden in the summaries, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.